Nate, I probably recorded 500 podcasts with you, maybe more. I'm still honestly a little bit nervous right now.
Really?
Yeah.
GD politics?
It's a whole new world.
What's it stand for?
It's dealer's choice. In the run up to this, I purchased goddamnpolitics.com, goshdarnpolitics.com for our religious friends. And I also purchased GalenDrukePolitics.com.
Good dude politics.
Hello and welcome to the GD Politics Podcast. I'm Galen Druke. In late 2015, shortly after I turned 25, I got hired part-time to produce a brand new politics podcast. The concept was something along the lines of data, but make it fun. And a buzzy new media company recently acquired by ESPN was behind it. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I just moved back to New York City after working at an NPR affiliate in Wisconsin, and I didn't have a job. The newsroom was full of nerds with big, often contrarian ideas and a taste for beer. And I fit right in. What followed was the ride of a lifetime. The 538 Politics Podcast, the show that we'd end up creating, would define the next decade of my life and set me on the path that would land me here today hosting the very first episode of the GD Politics Podcast. In case you're late to the news, ABC shuttered 538 earlier this month. I came to love and respect a lot of people in that job, but there's one person who loomed particularly large over the experience. He's bold, pioneering, knows how to whip the chattering classes into a frenzy, and is funnier than many people give him credit for.
It's not a compliment.
Welcome to the very first episode of the GD Politics Podcast, my dear friend, Nate Silver.
Good to see you, Galen. By the way, since I'm listening, aren't you don't drink beer, right? You're gluten resistant.
I think you're the only person who could call me out on that. You're right. I had originally written booze, but I thought that was a little too heavy-handed, so I changed it to beer.
Just trying to keep you on your toes.
I'm really glad that you're here, and I have a list a mile long of topics that I want to discuss with you. But just to start, it has been almost 2 years since we recorded a podcast together. How you doing, man?
I'm good. To full disclosure to the audience, we see each other reasonably often.
Okay, but not in these circumstances.
No, fair enough. No. Remember the last show at the Bell House where the writing seemed very much on the wall? I think we all knew something big and bad was gonna happen.
That is the last podcast we recorded together, was a sold-out live show at the Bell House.
Never known for its subtlety, the Walt Disney Corporation.
Well, I knew something was up because I'd invited all of the people who worked with us at ABC, and every single person came up with an excuse for why they couldn't come to the live show. And I was like, that's awfully strange. None of these people are coming to the live show. And then a few days later, they laid off most of the site. And so, yeah, we haven't been in front of microphones together since then. And since that time, you started a Substack, the Silver Bulletin. You wrote a book, On the Edge. You what else have you been doing?
I have my own podcast, Risky Business. I'm going to have Galen. I'm going to have you on Substack Live or something where we do a Democratic presidential candidates draft for 2028. So that topic is off limits. It's reserved.
Yes, indeed.
It's like you can't. If I order the steak at dinner, you can't get the exact same steak. It's that kind of thing.
Well, we have one more thing cooking up, which I'm just going to mention right at the top. We are going to do a 538 reunion live show. It's in almost exactly a month. I'm not going to share the details right now. I think I'm going to share them first in the paid subscribers chat. You know, you got to give people some recognition, man, for being supporters this early on in the process. So yeah, I'm going to share some details there. So if any of those people want to come to the 538 live show reunion, they can, and then I'll share those details more broadly. But I think it's going to be a good time, and it's not just going to be you. It's going to be some other folks whose names rhyme with Blair and Barry. I don't want to give too much information away so soon, but we've got a lot cooking up. So, Nate, Now that that whole chapter is over, 538 as part of Disney, I'm curious if there's a particular memory, good or bad, that sticks out in a particular way or maybe defines the whole experience for you.
Experiences I feel comfortable sharing in a public forum. I mean, you work together, you work in a place for a long time, and there are a lot of ups and downs. But, probably the emblematic story, right, was we relaunched under ESPN actually almost exactly 11 years ago today, because we did it right during March Madness. So we paid a lot of attention to like designing the site quite beautifully, right? I don't know. I did a lot of like bragging on Twitter about we're hiring an intern who graduated from Dartmouth College with a minor. It was so stupid and braggy. It was like inevitably setting a target on your back. But anyway, our goal, and this was a mistaken goal. Like the goal should have been to have this is a year or two before you're there, right? Our goal should have been to have really good content and have proof of concept with like a bunch of stuff that just like kicked ass, right? Instead, we had like a really pretty website that didn't break, and we were proud of ourselves, and we didn't really have enough experience. But anyway, the site went up, nothing broke. The traffic was, I don't know, pretty good, in line with our expectations. And we were having beers, and we're like, well, that was nice, right? And then we're like, oh shit, we have to do this every fucking day. We have to go back every fucking day and populate the site with content. And then, yeah, look, I'll be honest. I think the first couple of years were kind of difficult, right? To scale up from a founder's brand to a larger thing. And it took a while, I think, to get our stride. But like one thing I'd say is like, I think the mistakes that were made, and this is also true, by the way, of presidents, right? The mistakes that like Joe Biden made kind of were set in early, or the things that Trump is doing now and Elon are doing now, right? I mean, you can't necessarily put the cat back in the bag, but like, yeah, from the start, it was never really a business model around it, right? From the start, we had the incentive, or I'd had the incentive. When ESPN buys you, there was like a little bidding war, and like, I'm like, okay, now's the only time we can like actually ask for stuff, right? We can actually ask for like headcounts and resources. At first, it was funny how you like get invited to different types of events within the ESPN universe, right? At first, you're getting invited to like the Super Bowl and like the owners' boxes and things like that, right? And then by the end, you're on the ESPN radio box at MSG with people you don't know. I mean, it declined. It declined. That was for regular. It declined, I think, right? But like, so we hired a lot of people very quickly without really much of an editorial plan or a business plan, apart from like to expand the scope of what we were covering. By 2016, I thought editorially and design-wise and these interactives, the site was like much more itself, right? But then a certain Mr. Donald J. Trump won the presidency. I'm not sure if we want to rehash that. 2018 and 2019 were pretty good, right? Like 2017 to 2019 was like kind of like the glory years of the site. I thought we performed very well as a site in like 2020, but like, then the pandemic hit, so it was just a miserable year for I think anybody who's alive. Even I guess there's some people who like have the what's the verb for like cozy? Like it's like a L. It's like a 5-letter
hygge, the Danish word.
Those Danes.
Would you, in retrospect, do it all again?
No. No fucking way.
No fucking way.
No way in a million years. But like, okay, but that's having had that experience. So this is kind of with the benefit of hindsight. I would have built things differently, right? First of all, I mean, again, the original sin is like, I would have found a way to like actually have this is with perfect hindsight, right? Have a business model which is primarily oriented around subscriptions, number one, right? Number two, I would
subscribe to gdpolitics.com. Thank you very much.
Or Silver Bulletin.
Silver Bulletin, of course.
I would hire more slowly. Number three, I would like a lot of stuff that didn't really work at the site was stuff like there's a school shooting somewhere. How do we cover this with data? I thought the kind of conception of like data journals was like a little bit too narrow and kind of blinkered, right? I mean, like what works? I mean, actually a lot of things do work, right? Like some of the things that work well were like Claire Malone or like Perry Bacon writing with distinct voices about politics. And like that somehow works better because it's like more rigorous and like a factoid about here's a chart with school shootings or things like that, right? And so like, but letting things emerge a bit more organically. I mean, certainly like having like, we didn't launch this is 100% my fault, didn't launch like the House model or the midterm model in 2014, which kind of was a relatively boring election, right? Until like September or October. Actually, didn't have a House model, which had like a Senate model, right? But like, focusing more on like things that we had high reason to believe would work and then iterating from there and developing. But it's almost a reverse process. It's like, okay, you get a big blank check, not a blank check, you get a bit budget from Disney and you're like, we have to spend all this money right now. It's like, if you watch like Supermarket Sweep, you know what I mean? This is, I don't know if I'm dating myself or like gayifying myself or both, right? But Supermarket Sweep.
Both. I mean,
what is it? You have to like spend the most you can. I don't know what constraints there are. You have to like run around the aisles and like spend the most you can in like a 30-minute like shopping spree, right? And like it was a little bit like that. So yeah, not having a business model was tough. And then there's maybe more kind of like, I really go back and forth. Like one other problem you have when you're a founder, right, is like how much to like stick to people who kind of like share your ethos and your values versus saying, I don't want like 30 clones of myself, right? And I'm not sure if we ever, it's hard to do. I'm not sure what the right answer was exactly.
Well, do you feel like you should have hired more people like you?
Not okay. So, and we're being very candid here, right? I'm not sure I kind of recognize like some of the things that I stood for necessarily, apart from I think there were more like implicit political divides within the newsroom between, for lack of a better term, more left-wing and more centrist staffers. And probably, by the way, on the scale of like other media properties, this is probably like a 4.5 out of 10, where the average is very high, right? Like every newsroom like has these arguments, right? But like I'm coming from a point of view where like I care about like sports and like poker, and like if it were up to me, we'd probably cover more like tech. And I guess it was a little soon for AI stuff like 10 years ago, right? But the attitude would be like a little bit different.
I want to move on and talk about some stuff that's going on in the world. But before we do, with the closure of 538, there's been a lot of reflection on data journalism, what happens next for it, but also how it's changed newsrooms and its value as a worldview. I've heard you in some interviews even sort of say that you don't love the word data journalism anymore. What do you see as the future of that kind of work?
To a first approximation, it should inherently be a part of news gathering, right? Like I believe in like rigorousness. I think being a little bit more mature now, I think that like the line between rigorous and non-rigorous and using numbers or not using numbers is that's not a perfect correlation. To put
you mean you can use numbers and be full of shit?
Yes, and you can be rigorous. I mean, someone was pointing out on Twitter, right? The people who, unlike me, saw like Trump coming in 2016 in the GOP primary, right? We're more of the historians, more of the people who were not being like, well, empirically, Republican candidates have this moment in the sun and then they fade, and it's, the institution, the party decides. I mean, that was important. That was certainly like the biggest substantive mistake in my career, was being dismissive of Trump in the GOP primary for like a year until like, oops, he's won all the states now. He's probably going to win, or maybe a little bit before that. But yeah, look, I stand for like journalism that's truth-driven. I stand for journalism that's nonpartisan. I stand for journalism that's rigorous. I stand for journalism that also, which is confusing, that can have a little voice, right? I think having voice is part of being transparent and open, right? And kind of part of the skill of being a good writer or a good podcaster is like, I call it like different fonts, right? There's like one font where you're like, I am just kind of stating the fact. And then there's kind of another font where it's like, this is an opinion. Maybe this is like a serif font, right? And there's like a Comic Sans font where you're like trolling. And like, if you're a good communicator, then you can like have those different modes at once, which is why it kind of feels like the like factoid pieces where you put a graph up with school shootings felt like a mixed execution of the vision, whereas like the podcast felt like a proper execution of it. But by the way, but look, the New York Times is much more savvy about, I mean, they always were. They always had this like interactive team that was the, best in the business, except maybe 538. And they are now going to start doing some of the work that 538 had been doing to collect public polling averages. We are doing some of the work at Silver Bulletin. I mean, we are running literally the 538 models that I still have IP of the ones that I designed, right? And so like, I don't like...
We're going to get to that.
The average political news story is like much more data-driven, quote unquote, than it was 10 years ago. Or certainly, like, go back and like read New York Times campaign dispatches from like the 1980s. It's just like a crazy, man. It's just totally subjective, and so it's come a long way.
Nate, you did it. With that, let's move on and talk about what is going on in the world. But first, a break. Today's podcast is not brought to you by a direct-to-consumer mattress company. It's not brought to you by a hair loss or erectile dysfunction medication provider. And it's also not brought to you by a business-to-business e-commerce platform. Today's podcast is brought to you by you, the listener. I'm in the early stages of getting this podcast off the ground, and it will only succeed with your support. I want to bring you coverage that embraces curiosity, rigor, and a sense of humor. And I want to bring it to you on a regular basis with more episodes, more insight, and more laughs. I can only do that if you subscribe to and support this podcast. Go to gdpolitics.com and become a paid subscriber today. Even better, do it right now. gdpolitics.com, that's G as in gosh, D as in darn, and politics as in that hot mess. Head to gdpolitics.com to subscribe, and thank you. For the sake of transparency, we are recording this on Thursday, March 20th, and according to the presidential approval rating tracker on Silver Bulletin, Donald Trump is 2 percentage points underwater. That's down from 12 percentage points above water when he took office. Do you think it's too early to say that he's f***ed it up in the eyes of Americans?
Yeah, by the way, if you extrapolate that trend out to 2028, he'll have a negative 17 approval rating, which I don't think. No, so far, the decline in Trump's numbers is about typical for recent first-term presidents, right? Where he's lost. Disapproval is up about, I guess now 10 points, right? Approval is down by a couple points. It's like actually like a little on the worst side of average, but it's pretty average, just like honeymoon effect period. But it used to be the honeymoon effect was like longer, right? I mean, Biden took until September or August 2021 to go into the red, at least in our retrospectively calculated numbers, right? And Trump, it took him, whatever, like 45, 50 days or something. So what's happened now is like he started from a higher point. I mean, he started with a below 50 approval rating in 2017. This time he was above 50, but okay, so that's one mechanical way to answer it. I mean, like, I do think that like the executive orders he issued in the first week, right? It's a lot of DEI stuff. It's a lot of like immigration stuff. It's a lot of, whatever. Like, I thought that was all. I'd probably disagree with 3/4 of the executive orders as a, classic liberal L, lowercase L, but that is kind of stuff that was earned by winning the election and campaigning on those issues, right? But like, I just think the two things are like the tariffs and the Elon and the general lack of restraint, which is not surprising in the least, right? But like, it's just a sense of like, I mean, the economy is probably the most important part of it.
Wait, so how do you square those two things? Which is that on one hand, this seems no different than your average modern president in terms of the decline in approval rating. But on the other hand, there is, we've used this word a million times to describe this president, but unprecedented things going on in the way that Elon Musk is unilaterally sort of trying to dismantle parts of the federal government, and the tariff policy appears to change not just by the day, but by the hour. So was this all preordained, or has he gotten off on a uniquely wrong foot?
We had this article called 100 13 predictions for Trump's second term or something, right? And so I actually kind of, some of those will be right, some of the 113 will be wrong, right? So I actually thought that like the tariff thing needed to be taken more seriously than like Wall Street was taking it, right? Because he had made this commitment and like he seems to think it's a good idea and like he would at least do it in a tokenish sense to like not have to lose face, right? But no, I thought that Elon would get bored and that Doge would be, I just thought there wouldn't be, it's this weird in-between area, right? Where like the critique was always that like, well, Trump might talk a big game, but they're like not competent enough to actually do all that because they're kind of lazy. Elon might be intellectually lazy. He's definitely not like a lazy person. He gets a lot done, and if you don't like what he's doing, it's bad that you'd rather have him be lazy. But like I didn't think they're in this like kind of uncanny valley where they're like competent enough to like break things, but maybe not competent enough to fix them.
You know, I think the sort of deep irony here is that Elon Musk is ultimately not going to cut that much federal spending because he's not making big structural changes to the programs that are the most burdensome on the federal government spending. But in doing what he's doing, he's going to create, because it's so high profile and is pretty scattershot, and there's a lot of people who you can see in news reports that's having an effect on their daily life, and blah, he's going to create a backlash, and you're already seeing it in the polling, where people want more spending on all of these federal programs.
Yeah, I mean, his approval ratings are negative 13 or 14 underwater or something like that. We're going to start our Elon Musk approval rating tracker soon, I think, right? I mean, look, I don't know what to, I mean, I don't, as someone who went from having a lot of respect for Elon to like a grudging respect for Elon to kind of, I don't think he's a very smart, industrious person, right? I think it's impressive what he's accomplished, but like we're evaluating the person as it is right now, right? An NBA player who was great at age 25, who gets into some weird life situation and now is like, it's just so much is like, he's just retweeting every like, is there any conspiracy theory that he will not retweet? It's just cringe. It's like so cringe. And like, have some respect, Elon. Have some respect and like pick and choose. Because there's lots. I mean, I write lots of stuff that's critical of like the left, right? But like, have fucking judgment. Like, pick and choose a that's true. Because there's plenty of it that's true, and that you could be popular by tackling. Like, I don't have much sympathy for, for suing universities for not consistently enforcing the Civil Rights Act. Or, I mean, there's like that I can get on board with, tax Harvard's endowment. I'm excited with that. Ban gain of function research because now, more and more governments think there was a but like have fucking discernment and like it just I don't know I just kind of and like one of the groups that moved toward them were the people that I call in the book On the Edge, available at local bookstores, was called The River, right? So it's kind of Wall Street types and Silicon Valley types and the more friendly, cuddly like poker players and things like that, right? And like I'm just wondering, like, come on, you guys, you are about high human capital among other things, and Elon's like retweeting like cat turd and like, I mean, come on.
Okay, well, on the topic of Elon Musk, I have a game for you. It's a bit of a throwback, and it comes courtesy of the Scottish teens at Polymarket. And of course, it is buy, sell, hold. For folks who are unfamiliar with the Scottish teens reference, it is a deep cut. But I think many years ago, Claire Malone was like, who's even wagering on all of these online betting markets? Is it teenagers in Scotland? And over the years, I've heard from folks in Scotland being like, nope, it's not us. So whoever it is, we're going to use the odds that they have established, and you are going to buy, sell, or hold. I said on the topic of Elon Musk, so let's begin there. According to the Scottish teens on Polymarket, there is a 43%.
Which I can solve for. I'm an advisor to Polymarket. I should disclose that yeah.
Okay, disclose. And I didn't choose Polymarket as the betting market because of that.
It is a leading portal, Galen, for political. Okay.
Oh, okay, anyway, go off.
Yeah.
There is a 43% chance that Elon Musk will be out of the administration in 2025. Buy, sell, or hold.
Oh, I buy. I mean, it's only March 20th when we're taping this. And yeah, I mean, because there are two ways it can work. Elon can quit, or Trump can fire him. I mean, you already see, when you see, to decode things, you have like these detailed reports from like the New York Times and other news organizations of these very contentious cabinet meetings where again, if you're a long-time media watcher, the level of granularity, it's like Elon Musk had like a booger in his nose. It's like very small things. That means it's like people that were directly in the room, meaning the principals. So the cabinet is already through the New York Times, which they might hate, right? They're already trying to get rid of Elon, right? And the fact that like, if Trump struggles or his popularity goes down, right, he could get fired. There's the fact that like, Elon is pretty tempestuous. He's shifted from kind of center to quite, I think, right wing on some issues, like pretty fast, right? And like, I think Elon Musk is a net drag on Trump, and I think Trump is maybe smart enough in that particular way to. I mean, he's an obvious fall guy, right? I mean, at the very least, it's like, okay, if things aren't working, then you fire the manager.
Well, you'll hear though from folks who say Elon Musk invested almost $300 million in this guy's campaign. Trump owes him something. He can't just kick him out, right?
It's not that much money, really.
In the grand scheme of politics, it's not that much money. But
well, in the politics, it
does
is,
it mean
right?
anything?
But like,
is it a reason for Trump to keep him around?
I mean, Elon's worth what? I mean, his net worth has fluctuated, right? But like, it's like 1/1000th of his net worth, roughly. Not all of which is liquid, but like, it's not that much money. And Trump's not running again anyway.
So we're buying at 43%. Where would you put it?
55.
Okay. All right. That's good. Okay, moving on. According to the Scottish Teens, there is a 16% chance that Trump takes the Panama Canal in 2025. Buy, sell, or hold.
Sell. Yeah, that whole quadrant of like Panama, Greenland. By the way, I think it'd be totally fine if Greenland voluntarily wanted to join the United States. I mean, it's worth more to us than to Denmark.
Wait. Don't change
Denmark
the
can just...
Okay, so, but you think that the whole, and this is how they phrase it, in quotation marks, take the Panama Canal. You think this is all bull?
I mean, maybe a 1.6% chance. I don't think 16%. I mean, it's like, look, he's been willing, it is true that he's been willing to like, okay, the thing about tariffs, right, is that like, even if they're stupid ideas, then you can just kind of like fiat them from the White House. Like mobilizing for a military operation, even if Trump were stupid enough to do it, then like the deep state would resist it. And like men on the front lines and women on the front lines would resist it, I think, right? Like it just seems like that requires a lot. Like an invasion, I mean that would be
okay, so we're selling until 1%. Although, okay, so nonetheless, all of this has impacts on the real world. So, according to the betting markets, current Prime Minister of Canada, Liberal Mark Carney, has a 54% chance of being the Prime Minister of Canada after the next federal election. If you look at the 538 of Canada, which is called 338 Canada, you will see that the Liberals' standing in the polls has gone up 20 percentage points since Trump started talking about annexing Canada, and are now the favorites. If my reporting stands correct, by the time this podcast airs, Mark Carney will have called a federal election. We'll see how that reporting bears out, but it should happen this weekend. So while we may not actually end up, quote unquote, taking Panama or Greenland or Canada or whatever, it seems to be having real impacts on other countries.
Yeah, look, people are learning their lesson. I mean, Trump and even more so Elon are really radioactive international. I mean, because like for good reason. I mean, like the United States is like on its allies. Like why? I mean, they're being sane and strategic and yeah. I have not looked at the Canadian data and figured out like I'd hold because I'm looking at the polls and I haven't done any deeper meta-analysis, right? But yeah, I mean, the world is like all fascinated by American politics and yeah, they're paying attention and like Trump tending to see like other countries except Xi and Putin as kind of like non-player characters. It's like, no, they're people that like kind of rationally follow their incentives. And unlike some spineless Republican congressman who will tell you off the record over a whiskey sour, that like he'd secretly detest Donald Trump. Nothing I can do. Unlike them, their electoral incentives run the other way to like knee Trump in the balls every chance they get because Trump is seen as an unreliable, NATO partner now, which he is.
So what's going on? Why did Trump start his second term talking about manifest destiny and invading allies?
I mean, look, I'm all in favor of like
invading allies,
making fun of Canada. I'm in favor of making. I mean, they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1993, right? And like, but it's you know what? It's because I'm kind of secretly jealous.
How do you make? I mean,
Canada's very nice.
I don't know how I make sense of this world, but like, how do you make sense of what Trump is doing? I mean, you talk about game theory all the time. Is there a strategy here, or is it just like, why not?
I think it has to do with the fact that like he does a certain amount of trolling, and I mean, look, you can. I think you like. It's 78% like backward rationalization. Well, he's looking at McKinley and like, I'm a big pro Pan-American guy, right? I like the Americas. I like us better than Europe and better than Asia, right? And like I like I like Canada, I like Mexico, I like Costa Rica, I like Brazil,
So it sounds like you don't know what Trump is doing, and neither do any of us. But let's move on to our next buy, sell, hold question, which is a 24% chance that congestion pricing in New York City will be repealed before July. Buy, sell, or hold?
This is another one where, like, clearly if you have investigated where this stands in the courts, then you'll have a more informed opinion than I have. So I'm trusting the market over my own intuition. I might get an I love congestion pricing t-shirt made, I think. It's so nice, man.
The number of New York City gays who just like want to talk about how much they love congestion pricing, Nate, you're in pretty good company. There's a whole voting block out there. Okay, next one. 25% chance that there will be negative GDP growth in the first quarter of 2025. Buy, sell, or hold?
Oh boy. I guess I'd buy tentatively. GDP is a weird indicator because it, can have adjustments for inventories and things like that, and timing effects and things like that. Like, I don't think the economy is in a recession right now, right? Jobs are still growing at a fairly healthy clip, and the labor market is tight still, right? But, there have been like the Fed now is a GDP forecasting exercises that the Atlanta Fed puts out, had the print being negative. I think many economists and traders are skeptical of that and think it overemphasizes certain factors. All models are flawed, et cetera. But like a 25% chance that between like tariffs, all these federal firings, and just random there's still 11 more days to go. Maybe we get a big disruptive storm or something. I mean, I don't know. I would just think that by the way, 1/4 of negative GDP prints is like not that significant, but like I think I put it at 30, I guess.
Our former colleague, Ben Councilman at the New York Times, recently wrote a piece on the topic that says, quote, President Trump and his advisors say his policies may cause short-term pain, but will produce big gains over time. Many economists are skeptical of those arguments. Who are you siding with here? The economists or with the tariffs are worth it in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of those like tropes that like, it's like one of those annoying like resistance. It's like sane washing. Don't sane wash Trump. But I do think that like to say that, I think it's kind of sane washing, right? I mean, tariffs might have made more sense back when they also destroyed the economy a century ago, right? Because at least then there wasn't like so much like global integration of supply chains, right? Where now it's just kind of like, it's like taxing yourself. No, I don't think it's going to, I mean, there are theories about how they want to weaken the dollar because that makes our debt cheaper. I don't know. I'm not a macro guy, but like, I think it's just like, like the Treasury Secretary is not really defending the tariffs, and like very few people are. And I think, I mean, we talked before about like, why do I not buy that he would invade Panama when like he would do the tariffs? Because again, you can just kind of do the tariffs with like the press of a button pretty much, right? And it's something that like doesn't necessarily require, the executive, because they're given leeway by Congress in how you implement tariff policy, right? You say this is done, and then all of a sudden, like, every agency has to like follow suit, right? And like, so I think I don't think there have been situations before where like Trump broke something and the consequences were clear so soon. And yeah, look, you're going to have crazy economists on both sides, right? You, the modern monetary theorists on the Democratic side, and yeah, no, like I don't think there's any broader plan on the tariff. I mean, maybe there's part of a broader plan to like make like America more isolated from the rest of the world, right? But like, I don't know. I don't quite like buy the like. I don't think the like kind of more intellectual forms of Trumpism are like very compelling.
Final question on Trumpism. Whether or not Trump cedes power in 2029 or provokes a constitutional crisis along the way is not something that you can bet on in the online betting markets, as far as I can see, which I think is probably the ethical thing to do. I haven't thought much about it. But nonetheless, I want to ask you, since I think you've become a little more open about your personal views since leaving 538, how do you analyze the risk that Trump poses to constitutional self-governance?
Look, I think there aren't necessarily bright lines. There are semi-democratic regimes and semi-autocratic regimes, and then mostly autocratic regimes with like a token flavor of democracy, partially autocratic regimes where the state of Wisconsin was kind of like this in certain ways, you could argue, with extreme gerrymandering, right? Where like, wasn't technically impossible for Democrats to win, but like they were playing with a huge home field advantage, right? And it took a lot of sequences for that to reverse itself, right? So like, yeah, look, I think, and by the way, I do think Trump is a threat. I think Republicans more broadly is a threat. I think there's some anti-democratic impulse for the Democratic Party. I'm sure we'll talk about them later, right? I just think that like, if you talk to people in California, they think, and I'm more sympathetic to this than the typical political analyst, they think AI is going to radically change everything. I think that does not. I think that's a bigger threat to democracy than Trump. You know what I mean?
Why is that?
Well, it's more important in the long run. I mean, like, technology kind of drives everything in the long. I mean, not that great and terrible people don't matter, right? And like, it's also a moment. I mean, kind of what worries me is that you have this moment where you have profound technological change, and you also have these quote unquote great men, quote unquote, used in the sense that a certain type of historian might use it, meaning not necessarily a good man, but people who wield a great influence of power, right? And like, I think if Silicon Valley becomes more and more powerful, right, and more wealthy, and unlike previous technologies like AI concentrates power in the hands of already successful companies, right, and they don't seem to show like a lot of impulses to be particularly democratic exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, will there not be a 2036 presidential election? I mean, I think the chances of that are very low. Will most observers consider the 2036 election to be fair? If you could somehow take a reasonable, impartial observer, would they think it was fair? I mean, probably, right? But like, I think you already have had some like erosion of the democratic system. I mean, obviously, January 6th crossed a clear line, like, I don't even know if you'd say like no events in American history, because like kind of when you read about, politics nerds that cover elections kind of study like World War II and beyond, right? And I don't know all the crazy involving, we had a civil war, right? We have like Andrew Jackson and crazy like, I don't even, we had there was a huge, senator who was beat up and like you have assassinations and like, so like, I think kind of when you get like the first half of American history, then to say, well, I mean, we had like slavery in half the country when the country was founded, right? And so like you have to like understand in that historical context, but yeah, look, I'm maybe I should reframe the question, Galen. I mean, look, I'm a centrist on this, right? I'm not panicked. I'm also not dismissive of the threats, and I think they're you know, they're not necessarily even specific to Trump himself. And the fact that like Elon also, Elon kind of like, they're not really defending free speech. Not that anyone expected them to, really, right? And I think Democrats might respond with more partisanship, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure it's great for classical liberalism.
All right, well, let's talk about those Democrats, but first, a break. Today's podcast is brought to you by gdpolitics.com. As part of this new podcast, I want to hear directly from you and speak directly to you. And we're going to do that at gdpolitics.com. Using the paid subscriber chat feature, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions that I'll either answer myself or pose to my guests. You probably have questions about politics, but if you happen to be looking for a gift for your sister or want to know if your hat matches your outfit, I can help you with that too. The answers, by the way, are a subscription to GD Politics, and you have never looked better. That's also where I'll first share ticket information for the GD Politics 538 Reunion live show. In addition to the chat feature, if you subscribe at gdpolitics.com, you'll have access to the director's cut video version of the podcast when available. For example, you can find the video of today's podcast there without any of the swear words bleeped. Maybe save it for when the kids aren't around, or frankly, anyone who isn't a sailor or data journalist. Anyway, I can't do this without you. Head to gdpolitics.com and subscribe today. You recently wrote on Silver Bulletin that Democrats should have shut it down when talking about the federal government and the funding bill that passed earlier this month. And you said, quote, "This time, I'm with the anti-establishment crowd and the other 37 Senate Democrats. If for some bizarre reason you'd appointed me to be senator from New York, I'd have voted against the continuing resolution, even if it meant a shutdown." End quote. All right, Nate, why?
Well, for a few reasons, right? Like, number one, the only power the opposition party has really, if you don't control the House, if the other party has working majorities in the House and the Senate, is on 60 vote majority decisions, right? Where the Senate has decided for the time being to still require the filibuster or the cloture process, technically, for certain types of bills. Parties have not gone nuclear on that yet. And it's like, so part of me as a strategist is like, okay, well, if you have leverage and you don't use it, then you up, right? That you had power to make things better, whether for policy gain or political gain, and you didn't do anything with it, right? That's one part of it. Number two is that I think that ultimately it would have put Trump and Elon in a very awkward position, because when shutdowns happen, what happens is that there's a pocket in all the houses move, but the president's approval rating goes down. National parks terminate some of their services. The air traffic control is strained. Certain types of checks don't come in or start to bounce. Government agencies are less staffed. People that you might know in your social circles, if you live in DC, get furloughed and so forth, right? So but that kind of puts Trump and Elon in a spot where they have to now defend government as being good. It's that stuff was good. This other stuff we're trying to shut down was bad. And it also kind of creates a sense of chaos and mismanagement, which when you're the opposition party, then, frankly, you probably want, right? But I thought it was a more strategic move. And also, most people would say, well, the base is mad and you have to, the base things to chew on, right? Which I think is kind of a little overrated in the sense that base will find other things, but it seems like this is a pretty good fight to pick, right? Use it to because you don't control, not only do you not control the legislative calendar when you're the opposition party, right? Especially when Trump is in power and Elon with their attention to their ability to control media coverage, right? You don't control the conversation. Why not use this as a way to say hey, look, what Doge is doing is totally illegal. It's not something anybody voted for, right? And we're not going to vote for his budget until we're at least complying with the Constitution. That seems like a layup to me. I don't know, man.
I mean, when it comes to who wins the 2026 midterms or who wins the 2028 presidential election, I don't think this shutdown question really matters. But when looking at past shutdowns, oftentimes what ends up happening is whoever provokes the shutdown sees some decline in the polls and ultimately backtracks and ends up voting to end the shutdown without getting anything. And then whatever polling decline they saw during the shutdown reverts itself and life goes on.
So you don't have to. No, the point is that like you're deliberately creating ambiguity between Doge cuts and the shutdown, because people are just going to see a bunch of they liked not working, and some of that's because of the shutdown, and some
they're
of
going to
that's
say, "Oh, Trump is just messing it all up."
Right. Because it's well, technically it's Democrats' fault, because it's very hard to say, oh, it's technically Democrats' fault that like when by the way, Republicans control the Senate, right? They choose to keep the filibuster in place. I mean, they could eventually go nuclear, but you know, like they control everything. It's like, okay, you control everything. Why? And all Democrats, I don't know. I just think it's like an easy argument to make to be like, look, you cannot create this whole new. I mean, technically they renamed an Obama era institution, right? You cannot make all these like illegal cuts without the consent of Congress, and you can message test this stuff so that you can see like the way it sells and the way it doesn't. Not that I think Democratic message testers are always so perfect themselves.
Well, do you run the risk of, right now, the story in Washington is Trump is messing everything up to the point where even the markets are tanking. The tariffs are ad hoc and damaging.
No one cares about the story. No one cares about the story.
Musk has gone on. I mean, not the story in Washington, but the story of the Trump administration. And so do you risk frustrating that understanding if you shut the government down?
Nobody cares. And this is why people spend too much time in their political circles, right? People are mad, and Trump isn't that unpopular, by the way. It's only -2, right? It's not so bad. But like people are mad because they may see the stock market declining and because things just generally seem kind of like chaotic. But if you poll on Elon Musk, he's quite unpopular, and he's unpopular because of like tangible threats to what people perceive as entitlement program, Social Security, and things like that, right? Not because of the personal stuff, right? The personal stuff, if anything, it backfires trying to attack him personally, right? And so like use this as a lens to shine on Elon Musk, because also like Elon Musk is erratic as right now, right? Yeah, he is not going to have the kind of.
Do you have a theory for what's going on with him?
Sure, but I don't want to be accused of. I mean, I don't know. It's
but I don't want to be accused of libel.
No, look, he takes on an incredible amount. Let's talk hypothetically here for a second, right? Like he takes on like an incredible amount of stress, right? And he takes an incredible amount of like incoming fire, and like, you know, that causes collective strain, right? Now, there have also been reports from like investors and Tesla people that are concerned about like his narcotic use and things like that. And I'm nobody to criticize, right? But I'm just saying like I know a lot of kind of high motor, you'd call them, highly motivated people like on the autistic spectrum, which he kind of self-describes as being, right? Like it's kind of a stock character type in like the River of the World I kind of cover in the book. And like there are these inflection points where you pile like one too many things on, right, onto an already stressful calendar, whether it's a personal grievance or narcotic use or sleep, lack of sleep, right? And on top of that, you pile the fact that like nobody has the ability to tell Elon, hey, dude, you're this up, right? Because he'll fire his friends if they do that. Like to me, that seems like a pretty bad circumstance where performance can go from spotty but mostly pretty good with real high points to like where the global average goes down a lot, and you have it's kind of like with Biden and age. It's kind of what it reminds me of too, right? It's like, yeah, you can take like, you know, Elon, for example. I thought it was good for Elon as a soft-hearted liberal. At the very least, skilled immigration, I think, is very important to the future of the United States prosperity, right? And so, like, you know, that was a good thing he did, right? So it's like not batting zero, but it reminds me of like Joe Biden's age thing where yeah, you could kind of trot out the best of it and it was kind of okay. Maybe, you know.
And then some days you just end up cheering the end of Medicaid, or in Britney Spears' case, shaving her head in a barbershop and then beating a paparazzi vehicle with a golf club, I think it was.
Like he's running all these.
Is that where Elon is heading?
I just think, yeah, like if we're, I don't know, right? I mean, I'm just reporting publicly available information.
I don't think
that,
anyone's going to sue you for libel. Well, I hope not. So, okay. Nonetheless, Democrats are in this situation. They've already made their decision. So I guess we don't need to debate this anymore, but they still have to figure out what they're going to do next. And in this very moment, Democrats are quite unpopular. So according to a recent CNN poll that got a lot of play, I'm sure you probably saw it, the Democratic Party's favorability rating stands at 29%, which is a record low in that CNN poll going back to 1992. The poll also shows that by a 15-point margin, Democrats want their own lawmakers to work to stop the Trump agenda as opposed to working with Republicans. That's a steep reversal from even 2017, when Democrats overwhelmingly said their lawmakers should work with Republicans. So first of all, what should the party make of all of this?
Okay, so to the first approximation, I think this matters less than some people do because A, a lot of the opposition is coming from fellow Democrats, and B, like, you can just run as the opposition party in the midterms. It's more important for 2028 than for the midterms, right? But like, I mean, let's do the easy things first. Let's admit that Joe Biden catastrophically up by trying to run for a second term, and anyone who the statute of limitations just passed, right? If you were still defending that position, it's March 20th, as I'm saying this at 5:11 p.m. It's too late now. If you have not repudiated Biden trying to run for office again, and by the way, like undermining Kamala Harris at like every possible turn, telling her no daylight, kiddo, or whatever in the debate, okay, let's admit that this was one of the most consequential ups in political history. And if you have not apologized or repudiated by it for now, you should never work in politics again. Okay? That's a clear line, right?
Okay. The Nate Silver, March 20th, 511 principle.
Yeah, and related to that, let's get rid of these old people, all these old people. Why is everyone so old, right?
I was going to say, we used to share the same congressman, Jerry Nadler.
I'm leaving Jerry Nadler
I was going to say, you could run against him, but you're moving.
By literally like one block, I'm now in the Goldman district? What's his name?
Okay, so that's what you want to hear from Democrats. But I think still that's largely backwards looking. And you hear from some people when they look at polling like this or the attitude amongst the base that Democrats may experience their own kind of Tea Party because there's so much dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. Now, I want to say here that to the point you made about a lot of the dissatisfaction with Democrats is from their own side, that is true when you look at the poll. And while it may be a record low for Democrats, it's not a record low for either party. So in March of 2009, according to Pew polling, the Republican Party's approval rating was just 28%. So about where Democrats are now. Republicans themselves were pretty down on their own party after losing big time to Barack Obama. Nonetheless, they went on to flip 63 seats in the 2010 midterms. So this is not indicative of how the party might do in the coming midterms. But what did happen was the Tea Party, which went on to fundamentally change the GOP. So should Democrats find those Republican 2009 numbers comforting or concerning?
To me, it's more a matter of to me, some of those things are kind of obvious, right? I'm quite, I'm an unrepentant, maybe actually repentant, increasingly concerned capitalist in some ways, but I'm kind of a neoliberal, but I'm kind of agnostic on whether economic populism can work. Get rid of the wokeness. Nobody liked that. People pretended to like it. I mean, that's not quite true. I think people evolved with it. It's a more complicated conversation, right? But don't go back to the norms of peak 2020, right? Apart from that, and let's have some generational turnover Democrats, right? For lots of reasons, by David Shore's data, Trump won young voters. He, won by quite a big margin.
18-year-old men.
18-year-old men, yeah. It's the youngest that the voters get. Because men are less mature than women, so 18 is younger for a man than a woman, de facto. So let's have some generational turnover. Don't do the woke. Start to nominate candidates who actually have won races in important fashion. Hillary Clinton never really did. Kamala Harris never really did. Joe Biden never really did. Pick someone like won races by huge margins in purple states or things like that, right? And let's have an actually competitive primary, right? I mean, it's just so obvious. And then where it falls out on the populism or
all of that, I think, well, a lot of that is already happening. I think you can see how Democrats are talking about the culture wars for themselves, and in time, they are going to have a competitive primary for 2028. In the meantime, do you think they're at risk of a Tea Party?
I don't know what form it would take. You know what I mean? I mean, like, in part because, like, some of the people who are kind of angry might actually be the kind of like boomers and older Gen X, right? Who are more kind of like, they're not exactly centrist, but they're not super left either, right? These are kind of like the Substack reading crowd, you know, the contrarian, Jennifer Rubin's contrarian is performing very well. No, I have comments on like how, it's also interesting, by the way, that like the mainstream media like fired all these like anti-Trump personalities basically when there's actually quite a big demand for them. So they're now all getting rich on Substack, which I invest in, by the way. But yeah, like, so like people are kind of angry and like they want anti-Trump, they want anti-GOP. They probably don't want anything with like, well, but then the younger voters might want a more fervently left-wing flavor, right? And like on some issues, and like so it's unpredictable kind of what exactly would emerge. One reason why I thought that like picking this fight or escalating this fight, maybe better term, over the shutdown, is that like it kind of lacks ideological flavor. It's just a good team building fight, right? And like, you know, in the short run, like I think Democrats on the center and the left can be united around, you know, anti-Elon and anti-oligarch stuff, right? You know, again, I'm a squishy centrist, but I like democracy, and I'm concerned about the accumulation of power in ways that undermine competition and things like that, right? And like, you know, I think I have concerns about that too, even if I wouldn't want to like, you know, replace the economy with like democratic socialism or whatever, right? Like that to me seems like points of common interest. And like, it's also like, I don't know, I'm fine with like, I think disagreement's fine within a party as long as like there are healthy avenues for like dissent, right? Like I'd rather wind up with the Tea Party than with Blue Sky, right? Where Blue Sky is very intolerant of like people outside your circle. And like, that's a mistake Democrats made in like 2020, you know, to 2024. And like that has a very short-lived effect, right? It cows people into submission in first, but you know, can you have a Democratic base that's more righteously indignant and make some mistakes, but is also like tolerant to building like a big tent coalition somehow? It's a tough needle to thread. I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah. And in some ways, the way that Republicans broke out of their ideological mold was by Trump amassing enough power to just say like, okay, well, if I don't care about this policy, then it doesn't matter anymore. And the party's moving in another direction. And so sometimes it takes strong leaders to be able to say, okay, well, we agree on this and we'll pursue that, but I don't agree with you on that. And so I'm going to pursue something else, maybe something that's more popular with the broad public, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And I don't think that we have seen that kind of strong, charismatic leader who can wield their own sort of politics of personality to make all of the different interest groups get in line in some ways. And to that end, do you think Andrew Cuomo will be the next mayor of New York City?
Oh God, I always get New York City politics stuff. I suppose I do. First of all, New York City has low key never been that left of center, really, right? It's always been kind of capitalistic. It's not kind of California. It's pragmatic. It's not kind of California. You know, California gets all the weird cooked in a lab political movements, whether on the left or on the right. A lot of conservatism, kind of the more, you know, ideologically intense strange of conservatism come from California, right? New York is more saltwater and kind of pragmatic because Republican primaries are not usually important in New York. A lot of people who would be Republicans are registered as Democrats. So like Cuomo is kind of like a center left probably and a big name. And like New Yorkers also do not pay that much attention to local politics, right? We are like the center of the world, right? And so, yeah, I think, and also like Cuomo benefits from the fact that like the reasons he was canceled, like if you go back and read the allegations about the various like gropiness and like stuff like that, like it's kind of bad, right? I mean, I don't want to start using terms that like, when I read them, I was like, this has happened a lot, right? And like, it's pretty inappropriate stuff. I don't think anyone's accusing him of like, I don't want to get in a legalistic quagmire, right? But because he was like canceled at the moment, like there were all these like trivial cancellations, right? People like, oh, everyone who was canceled, it can't have been too bad, right? Whereas you should scrutinize stuff like how did he handle like the nursing stuff, home stuff in COVID, but I don't know. I think I probably, what do the Scottish teens say?
I didn't look it up, but I'm going to do it.
I would think there's a 65-70% chance.
You're really good, Nate. It is a 69% chance
there we
that
go.
Cuomo will win the Democratic primary in New York, which means very likely becoming mayor. It's almost like you're a Scottish teen yourself.
There you go.
Okay, final politics question, and then we're going to move on to something different, which is, who do you think the best politician in America is from a strategic perspective?
I don't know. Obama looks pretty smart, I get, but then Obama lots of up, right? He probably should have gotten more done in in the first term. And yeah, who looks good? I don't know. What's your answer, Galen? Maybe Josh Shapiro for not getting the running mate slot. Because now Tim Walz is doing the podcast tour, and it's like, come on, man, you gotta or Brian Kemp looks smart, I guess, but like a lot of this is kind of luck. I don't know.
Obviously, only time will tell, but I think that if you want to win over the median voter, you don't do it by just sort of taking the median position on everything, like pulling a Susan Collins or something like that. I think the way that you do it is more...
Susan Collins has been reelected a lot in a blue state.
Which, yes, that is one way to do it. But I think that another way to do it, which might be more appealing in this moment, is the Ruben Gallego, right? Where you're kind of...
Okay.
You sort of flirt with democratic socialism or economic populism in some cases, but then you're hard on the border. I think that taking positions that frustrate perceptions of you is very important in politics, because the Democratic Party is a bad, unpopular brand, more so than the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is also a bad, unpopular brand. And so strategically, you want yourself to not be viewed as in lockstep with either of those two things. And the way that you do it is by creating daylight between yourself and any of the top to bottom ideological partisans on either side. The left will get all kinds of mad at Fetterman, but at the end of the day, he is taking clear, pretty well-defined positions that oppose each other, right? When it comes to the ideological spectrum. He's very pro-Israel, he's very pro, abortion rights or unions or whatever. And so I think that that's the key.
I think maybe I missed the two obvious answers, which are Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, right? I mean, who most outperformed expectations? I mean, Bernie never won a nomination, obviously. He's still drawing very large crowds. I think he has moved policy to the left on things like the minimum wage, right? And I think they'll be, Trump is obviously, I don't want to get into too much of a thing about how would you assess his presidency? I mean, you probably can infer from the first hour of this conversation, what I think, but you have to give him credit for
bold,
a certain
pioneering, knows how to whip the chattering classes into a frenzy, and is funnier than people give him credit for.
He is quite funny. That matters a lot. I don't know. I don't want to give too much away because we're going to have our draft, so I'm not going to reveal too many.
Yeah. All right. We'll save it for the draft. Okay, finally. The only reason I'm doing this is because I want to introduce it. So do you remember how to introduce Model Talk, Nate? I know it's been a minute.
I'm Galen Druk. Oh, it's...
Yeah, okay, I'll do that part, though. I'll do that part. All right, okay. 3, 2, 1. I'm Galen Druk.
I'm Nate Silver.
And this is Model Talk. Okay, so we're in March Madness officially. I think you've discussed the models plenty on your Substack. But one thing that caught my eye is that you noted that the women's model is notably different from the men's model. So I guess we know where you come down on how many genders there are. But why are they different, or how are they different?
There are a couple of things, right? One is that women actually play all 4 years in college. You know, Caitlin Clark played until she's a senior because the WNBA won't let you get drafted until you're age 22, which seems kind of crazy and undemocratic to me. And probably they should have a better union that sues to try to fix that, right? But yeah, so therefore you have much more dominant squads in the women's game, right? There's less player turnover. You can have players who are there for all 4 years. And so by the time this happens, the women's tournament will also be underway, but like, don't pick a lot of upsets in the women's tournament. That's kind of the largest, most significant difference. By the way, I said this on my own podcast, but like, also you can bet less on women's. They're like, if this guy is betting on women's sports, he must be onto something. But yeah.
On that topic, I was looking up some polling on how people feel about gambling these days. And according to a recent AP poll, a majority of Americans don't want betting on college sports to be legal in their states. And then, to quote a recent Wall Street Journal article, over the past 2 seasons, at least 7 Division I teams have been implicated in unusual betting activity. Some of the suspicious wagers involve people connected to an ongoing federal investigation into sprawling gambling ring that conspired with Jonte Porter to manipulate his performance in NBA games. So, Nate, I know that you're an interested party here, but do you think...
I have profound ambivalence about the proliferation of sports betting. But yeah, give me a question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, tell me more about that. I'm an AP pollster. I'm calling your cell phone. Ring, ring. Nate Silver, would you like to answer this survey?
Sorry, it went to voicemail.
Okay.
Okay, fine. I pick up because you like.
Do you think that betting on college sports should be legal in New York State?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, so I guess you're not that conflicted. But look, betting on sports has exploded in recent years. Now, I don't know very much about it, but I know because my friends all now do it. And I also know that when the sports section at 538 shut down, we got messages from people being like, wait, what the heck happened to all of those models? Nate Silver made me so much money over the years.
Yeah, well, now we're charging for it. But yeah, look, so there are a couple of big issues. One is that, like, was this something that like kind of is more an insider thing, but like the sports books actually will basically ban you if they think you're a winning player. Not all of them, and technically they'll let you bet very small amounts, right? But like, that's total bullshit, right? You have to offer the same line to every customer and the same limits to every customer, right? I think that's one thing.
You got banned, didn't you?
It's called limited. I am allowed to, there are like 9 New York sports books. I can like bet on like 2.5 of them. 2 that give me pretty unlimited brain, half that kind of reasonable, and then the other 6 I can't really bet meaningful amounts at all.
Do you know why I know this?
It's in the book.
Yeah, because I read your book.
Good. The other bit, like, look, fundamentally, like, you want to create, there's a fundamental touch because you want to create friction, right? Like, I have been, I've spent the whole year betting on the NBA. I wrote about that in the book, right? And like, for some reason, I didn't have like the right apps downloaded in Vegas, right? So I'm like, oh, here's a good bet. I want to bet, whatever, $1,500 on the Mavericks or whatever. So I'm going to go down to like the Win Sports counter and give them money, even though it's like 4 a.m, right? It's like, it's kind of embarrassing, right?
Nate.
And probably the expected. No, it's actually really fun to like go to like the sports book counter and like make a bet, and you give them money, they give you a ticket, right? And then collect.
What were you doing awake at 4 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas?
I don't even, I kind of like, I'm not as much of a night owl. It was maybe like, no, I think it was different. I think it was like 10 a.m. and I had to like shower and like go to like a poker tournament.
The story changes.
Okay, the story changes, right? But like, But the point is that like when you have to do something physically, there is friction there, right? And friction prevents you from sometimes doing the stupidest, most degenerate things because there are eyes on you and the fact that like sports betting is so frictionless, you can kind of like deposit like unlimited amounts from your bank account. I mean, I would create more friction, right? That like, you can deposit and the funds are available in 24 hours. Simple thing, right? 24-hour waiting period every time you deposit funds before you can use those funds, right? Just to stop the impulsiveness and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, the argument the sportsbooks would make is that if we don't do it, the illegal market will capture it. That crypto books, which are hard to regulate, will capture it. And by the way, since we are above board, we are able to track when these scandals occur, who is making these bets, which a gray market book can't do. And I am halfway persuaded by all of that, but you have to treat customers equitably, and you have to not make it so easy. Like when I play in a big poker tournament in Las Vegas, right? I have to like actually plan for that. I either have to get cash out of the bank because some of these have $10,000 entry fees, etc., or wire money, and that requires some like advanced planning, and that probably like prevents me from like tilting and just saying, oh well, I'll wire money immediately because there's like a day or two of waiting period and things like that, and so like, and when you're getting large amounts of money, you have to explain what you're doing with it. So like having more friction, I think is the key.
All right, Nate. I think we're going to have to wrap things up there because we're actually about
to
go get dinner.
Okay, we actually physically have to wrap up. Okay.
We have to wrap up in the virtual world so that we can hang out in the physical world. But anyway, Nate, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. We'll do it soon, Galen. I'll see you in 55 minutes approximately.
My name is Galen Druke. I'm in the early days of getting this podcast off the ground, and I appreciate your support in any way possible. Subscribe to GD Politics wherever you get your podcasts, and if you'd be so kind to rate and review us. Also, importantly, subscribe to the Substack at gdpolitics.com. There you'll get updates on what we're doing, extras, and you can support the project directly. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.